So this seems to be a very common problem with the factory T56s. I get a lot of complaints with grinding in reverse, popping out of reverse. So I got this whole assembly laid out on the table, and I just want to show you guys what you're looking at, what's going on, why your reverse is acting up. Now, obviously, with any gear, if your synchronizer is worn out, it's going to grind in gears, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But with this specific issue, it's most likely something to do with your shift fork, which I'm also going to get into. So let's take a look at what a grinding in gears looks like. Now, if you look at these engagement teeth, you can see that there's some missing material on the front, and it's just putting a burr and it's adding a lip to those teeth. And what's happening is the engagement teeth on the slider are mashing and grinding on the engagement teeth on the gear because that synchronizer is worn out. It cannot synchronize this gear properly, and you're going to have a grind and you're going to get wear on those teeth. And when it gets to a point where the teeth on the gear and the teeth of the slider are so flattened out, it's going to start popping out of gear. It's not going to want to stay engaged in the gear. But more often with this reverse issue, it has something to do with the engagement, and it has something to do with the fork itself, which I'm going to show you right now. Now let's take a look at this reverse fork. You can see these little plastic pads or fork pads, bushings, whatever you want to call them. Now this one has very, very slight wear. There's nothing wrong with this pad, but they like to break off over time. And once that happens, you're going to add a lot of play between the fork and the slider. Check out this picture of a broken pad. That thing's toasted. And what that's going to do is it's going to add all this play, and it's not going to want to engage the gear all the way. Even though it may feel like it's going all the way into gear, it's going to pop out and in some cases grind and then pop out because it's trying to synchronize, but it cannot fully get there. And there's a good example of all that play simulating broken shift fork pads within the slider. And there's also this little snap ring that holds the fork on the rail. I'll put in a picture as well. That thing likes to come apart. And if this transmission's been opened before, they most likely didn't replace that snap ring. And it does like to come out the groove. And if you've seen other my T56 videos, you know that the replacement snap rings aren't the best fit up either. So your best bet there, when you take off that snap ring, is to be very gentle with it. Do not overstretch it and reuse that snap ring. We live in a time where new parts can be flawed out the box. So with every transmission rebuild I do, it's almost like a blueprint. You can't just buy a rebuild kit nowadays and throw it in and think that everything's going to work because it's new. You really got to check things and look over things. So with that being said, let's take a look at how to test a synchronizer. So the first thing I look for is I put the synchro on the gear and just ensure that there's a gap between the synchronizer and the engagement teeth. If there's no gap there, that immediately tells me the synchronizer is worn out, and that's going to cause that damage on the teeth that I was talking about. But that's not a foolproof method. You want to spin the synchro on the cone and make sure that it actually locks the gear and releases. I've actually gotten new synchronizers out of the box and they don't even lock the cone, or they get stuck on the cone, and that can cause more issues as well. So that's a good way to test your new parts. Now, if your pads are good, your synchro's good, and all that checks out, there's definitely a chance that whoever quote-unquote rebuilt it last didn't put something back in the right order, or something's out of place, which I've seen before. I actually had a T56 come in once. They replaced the main shaft in it, and the complaint was that he couldn't get the transmission to spin after he replaced the main shaft and put it back together. Come to find out, there was parts installed upside down. The shimming was completely off. At the end of this video, I show you how all these parts are installed on the transmission, so be sure to stick around for that. But here's a little clip from that video. I'll leave the link below if you want to check it out. But this is just an example of how a simple upgrade can really screw up your build. So I just found something else wrong while I was cleaning up this assembly. That this is like really tight on here. It won't even barely spin right there. And this is a common upgrade with the bronze pads. I don't know if you guys can tell, but this one isn't on all the way. You see how there is no gap between the fork and the pad, and on this one we got a slight gap there on both sides. So this pad is not in all the way, and it's causing this to bind up. Make sure you put these on all the way. They should be flush and touching the fork. So I'm going to do that right now. There we go. All right, now check it out. That's what you want. This should spin on the fork. Good to go. Just double check what you're doing, guys. If you're doing this the first time, second time, whatever, you know, if something's not spinning or binding, then there's usually an issue. A couple tips to avoid having this issue is to just be easier on reverse. A lot of times we're in a hurry, we're still moving forward when we engage reverse, and it just adds a lot of stress to these components. What I recommend is after you push the clutch, wait 1 to 3 seconds, you're completely stopped, and then engage reverse. That'll definitely help not stress out these parts. And if you have bad clutch release, that may be contributing to this issue as well. Hopefully at this point, you're able to diagnose your problem or you have a better understanding what's going on. Now I want to show you what I like to do to clean up some parts that I can fix that have some wear and what you can do to get your transmission back together. Now when these parts have some damage to them, it doesn't necessarily have to be reverse. This is a process that I always do to the sliders and the gears when a transmission is being rebuilt and there was some damage to them, and they can be saved. But some of these parts are pretty worn out. I would recommend replacing them. But if you want to get by, these are some things you can do to clean up the gears. And if you're on a budget, just to get your transmission back together for the time being, this is something you can do. But I always recommend that you replace worn components in order to have a long-lasting, functional, reliable transmission. Now I'm gonna take this slider apart because these dog teeth, they have some wear on it, but they're still reusable. And when this stuff happens, it develops a burr on the edge. So I'm gonna go through this and just take off the burr and show you guys how I do that. And this slider will be able to be reused, even though it has some wear. Say that your teeth are just completely flattened out, you need to buy a new slider. Some of them you can flip the slider around to the other side and you got a fresh set of teeth. That's because there's nothing that engages that way. Like a 1-2 slider, it's first gear, second gear, 3-4 slider, third gear, fourth gear, fifth, sixth. But reverse is just one way and back. So you can actually use that other side, but it depends on the model T56 that you have. Same thing with this gear. We have a big burr on the teeth. So I'm gonna go through and just clean up these teeth. It's really important that you don't take away more material. You just wanna take away the top edge and not the base material. The more material you remove, the harder shifting you're gonna have, and you increase the chances of this popping out. But we still have plenty of teeth on here, and this should be able to be reused, no problem. Now I also want to talk about the keys and the springs in here. That's something that you definitely want to take a look at because these can wear out as well. But where they like to wear out is along the middle edge where the keys sit. You can see that discoloration there. It's not too bad actually. It's not digging into it too much. It's kind of just on the surface. And as well as the edges. That one has a little bit more wear. It actually has a little indent right there. And of course this little notched hook end, that has a little bit of wear as well, but it's not too bad. So this you could probably get away with, but it's best that when you have these parts apart to replace these small components and not take the chance. So I'm just using a little Dremel and a cutoff disc on the top. And again, I'm just taking away this burr on the edge. You can see that burr. I can feel it with my nail. And you can see here, I'm just taking the very top burr off. It's very important that you don't grind into the base material. Just want to get rid of that burr. Make sure that you clean that material out of here. I'll put in a clip or a picture of a slider that had some pretty bad burrs, that was rebuilt a few times, and you can see all the pitting inside the slider. Also, the back side of these keys love catching material in there. So if you're not replacing them, that's a good spot to clean out. Also, this wave spring likes to wear out on these edges right here. You can see that wear. This one is fine. I've seen it a lot worse than that, where it's almost, the material's almost gone there. It gets so thin. So that's something I'll also look at. So just look at all your parts thoroughly. Try to get an understanding. Hopefully this video helps you understand it a little better. All right, teeth are cleaned up. Everything's deburred and cleaned and ready for assembly. I'm gonna show you guys how this hub goes together first with our springs and keys. If you take a look at your slider, there's a good chance you have a grind mark. Some early ones do not have the grind mark, but that pretty much locates the key slots on the inner hub to the outer hub, because this can go on 3 different ways. There's 3 slots here, and there's also 3 sets of slots on the outer slider. Now the grind mark, if you have it, you line it up with the inner and the outer, and you will be in the key slot, but it's always good to double check that. Next, we're going to take our keys. Now with these keys, you can also upgrade to the billet keys, but this is reverse, and you know, you're not really hitting reverse like you're hitting 3rd gear. So they're not that critical to put them on. I've had somebody ask me before, how do you install these with the billet keys versus the factory stamp keys? Now the only difference is when I hook the spring to the key. On a stamped key, I like going on the inside of the key so it grabs it in the middle. But on the billet key, you can't do that because there's no hole, there's no slot in the middle. So it's good to go like that, and then the opposite side is good to grab the key like that so you have equal tension. I'm going to be installing the stamp keys. It's important when you install these that you do the opposite to the other side. What I mean by that is, if this spring goes in going this direction, when I flip this over, it's going to go the opposite, because you're going to have a space here that doesn't have tension on it. You just hook it in the middle. They can be a little tricky and they can fly across the room, so just be careful. There we have our space, and should have a spring on the other side taking it up. Same thing here, have that space. The spring is on the other side. You can almost see the spring go in the opposite direction through the bottom side. Now the little spring and key keeper goes on because, like I said earlier, this only goes on to engage reverse. There is no direction from one side, so we need to put this on in order to keep the springs and the keys inside their slots. If there was a synchro there, we wouldn't have to worry about that because the synchro would hold it. But now the way this goes on, I believe, is supposed to be oriented into the empty spot where it has the wings here. I do not think it's critical. I've torn down transmissions and this was in every direction and there was not a problem with reverse, but I like to put things back from the factory, so that's how it's going to go on. And it kind of just snaps in. I like to take my little screwdriver and just work it around. Just make sure it's under the edge, the top edge. Again, I'm using a pocket screwdriver. I can't really get that much force with this thing, so there we go. Now I'll show you how it stacks up in the transmission. Let's just say the transmission's vertical right now, and I'd be stacking everything onto the main shaft. I'll put in a little slideshow as well. It'll show you piece by piece how it stacks up. Take our fork and the casting number. You should be able to read it, or this edge, flat side should be down, this side should be up. And then our plastic bushing spacer goes right on. Synchronizer, and remember there's 3 slots on this synchronizer. It's gonna line up with the keys on the synchronizer assembly. Wave spring, and then the gear. And then you would have a thrust washer and then a snap ring to hold it all into place. And then there's also a snap ring for this guy. That's in reverse. You can see how that keeper right here holds everything, holds those keys into place when you shift into reverse. Because if that wasn't there, they would pop right out. Well, I hope you learned something in this video. I hope you get a better understanding why your reverse is acting up and the problems and components associated with it. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. If you need parts, I'll leave my information below. Thanks for watching, guys.